homage to the fundamental teacher Buddha Shakyamuni, homage to the wisdom warrior Manjushri, homage to all the lineage masters. The supreme subtle Dharma is rarely encountered in eons. Now we hear and follow it. May we realize the Tathagata's meaning. To liberate beings, please generate bodhicitta. Next, let's discuss the Platform Sutra of the Sixth Patriarch. In the Platform Sutra, we are currently in the chapter on Sudden and Gradual. Previously, we explained the case of Xingchang. The Platform Sutra primarily recounts the stories of his enlightened disciples or biographies of great masters whose activities to benefit sentient beings were vast. By learning how they relied upon virtuous friends and their teachers, I believe that later practitioners, whether lay people or monastics, should find very helpful lessons to draw from. When we rely on any teacher during our Buddhist study and practice, the process is somewhat similar to the Chan tradition. Especially for those of us studying tantric teachings, many of the methods for sudden enlightenment and the instructions that directly point to the nature of mind are very much like those in Chan. In this process, I believe many of us will find reflections of ourselves within these principles and stories. We just talked about the person named Xingchang. In the beginning, he was what one might call a bad person. At that time, although there was no major conflict between the masters of the northern and southern schools, there were various views among their disciples, leading to much disharmony. So, Xingchang from the northern school arrived there at that time. The sixth patriarch, Huineng, being a highly realized master, was prepared. He used to keep 10 ounces of gold by his pillow. When Xingchang arrived, he tried to strike the master's neck with a sword. The master simply let him strike, yet the sword could not cut him. Then the master said, "We have no debt of life from previous existences. This is the money you need. I did owe you gold from a past life. Take it with you." Xingchang was later deeply moved to repentance and sought to be ordained under the sixth patriarch. The master told him, "If you wish to become a monk, leave for now. Otherwise, it could be dangerous for you if my disciples find out. Go for a while. You may return later." After being ordained elsewhere, he eventually returned. He would chant the Nirvana Sutra every day, as I recall from our previous session. Regarding the content of the Nirvana Sutra, he first asked about permanence and impermanence. Huineng said the Tathagatagarbha is impermanent. At that point, Xingchang felt this contradicted what he had known before. He thought it did not align with the sutra's meaning. The sixth patriarch said, "I once explained this to Bhikshuni Wujinzang. After she read it to me, there should be no error." That was the general gist of where we left off. Xingchang then said, "My wisdom is shallow. Would the master please explain in more detail?" We reached that point, right? The master said, "Do you know, if Buddha nature were permanent, what would be the use of speaking of dharmas of good and evil? To the end of an aeon, not a single person would ever resolve to attain Bodhi. Therefore, when I say it is impermanent, it is exactly the way of true permanence spoken of by the Buddha." Then the sixth patriarch said to Xingchang, "Do you know? When I speak of permanence, it is actually correct. When I speak of impermanence, it is also correct. Both are correct. Actually, in this context, we should talk about our so-called Buddha nature. It is not some permanent entity as we imagine it in our minds, nor is it something impermanent as we might think. These two extremes are not the ultimate teaching. Of course, in the process of definitive analysis, we use terms like the Tathagatagarbha is permanent, all-pervasive, and spontaneously accomplished. But in reality, it transcends both permanence and impermanence. Our worldly terms for permanence and impermanence cannot be used to describe it. Why is that? The sixth patriarch said at that time, "Do you know? If Buddha nature were permanent, things like good and evil would be impossible. If it were eternally fixed, how could someone who was once evil become good, or how could anyone perform virtuous or non-virtuous deeds? Even after countless aeons, no one would ever resolve to attain bodhicitta, because if one who had not resolved to attain bodhicitta did so later, transitioning from non-virtue to virtue, and finally attaining the fruit of perfect enlightenment, then that process would already be one of change and impermanence. Therefore, we cannot say that Buddha nature is permanent in a literal sense. If it were truly permanent and unchanging, distinctions between good and evil would be illogical, and throughout endless aeons, not a single person could ever give rise to bodhicitta. To refute such a rigid view, the sixth Patriarch spoke of it as impermanent. His use of impermanent actually aligns with the path of true permanence taught by the Buddha. In other words, it is truly inconceivable, beyond conceptual play and ordinary thought. This fits the path perfectly, and thus he dismantled that fixed notion. Why call it impermanent? Because it is not permanent in a mundane way. Indeed, if the Tathagatagarbha were strictly permanent, these faults would follow. Furthermore, if all dharmas were impermanent, then every single thing would have its own self-nature, subject to birth and death. Thus, true permanence would have places where it does not pervade. Therefore, when I say it is permanent, it is exactly the true impermanence spoken of by the Buddha. Next, he refutes the second extreme. If all phenomena or the Buddha nature were strictly impermanent, existing in the first moment but vanishing in the second, as we often describe it, if it were that kind of impermanence, then everything, whether mental or material, would possess its own independent self-nature. For instance, as we drift from past lives to future ones in samsara, continuously undergoing birth and death in a seemingly endless stream, if things were strictly impermanent, then true permanence would have places it does not pervade. The true permanence of all phenomena, all dharmas, including Buddha nature, its continuity, its permanence and its order, would be incomplete. If it were impermanent, it would exist before and vanish after. That leads to the fault of it not being all-pervasive. That is why he speaks of it as permanent. What he calls permanent is the very meaning of the Buddha's impermanence. This sense of impermanence is actually, as we discussed when studying Je Tsongkhapa's three principal aspects of the path, the extreme of existence is refuted by appearance, and the extreme of non-existence by emptiness. For most people, this is a bit difficult to explain or understand. Normally, one would say appearance refutes the extreme of non-existence. But why did Lama Tsongkhapa put it the other way around? Actually, the meaning here is the same. True permanence and impermanence are not what our conceptual thoughts imagine. As we mentioned in class recently, some of our Khenpos noted that when analyzing the ultimate truth of the third turning of the wheel of Dharma, Tathagatagarbha should be considered permanent. However, this permanence has already transcended our ordinary mind's idea of a thing that just stays the same over time. That kind of permanence is only apparent permanence, not the true thing. This is the true meaning. In fact, for many Buddhists today who wish to understand Buddha nature and the Tathagatagarbha, understanding the mind stream in both ultimate and relative terms is essential. This question should be well understood. This is one layer of meaning. The Buddha spoke for the sake of ordinary people and non-Buddhists who cling to false permanence, and for the followers of the two vehicles who mistake the permanent for the impermanent, together forming the 8 inversions. Therefore, in the definitive teachings of Nirvana, he refuted those partial views, and clearly taught true permanence, true bliss, true self, and true purity. He explains here that the Buddha spoke specifically for ordinary people and non-Buddhists. They cling to false permanence. This false permanence relates to permanence, purity, self, and bliss. They mistake what is actually impermanent for something permanent. They take what is not pleasurable to be bliss. They take what is selfless to have a self. They take what is impure to be pure. These are the 4 major inversions of worldly people: permanence, bliss, self, and purity. As for the followers of the two vehicles, the Shravakayana and Pratyekabuddhayana, they focus on impermanence, selflessness, impurity, and suffering. They believe nothing is permanent, so they say all is impermanent. They believe there is no bliss, that the nature of samsara is suffering. They believe there is no self appearing, only selflessness. In reality, they see everything as impure. These are the 4 of impermanence, selflessness, suffering, and impurity. While some Theravada practitioners seeking liberation regard these as the ultimate truth, they are actually falling into another extreme. This can also be called an inversion. Mistaking the permanent for the impermanent, and so on, makes 8 inversions in total. In the most definitive, ultimate teachings of nirvana, all 8 of these extremes and inversions are refuted one by one, whether it's existence or non-existence, purity or impurity, permanence or impermanence. These are all partial views. Instead, the Buddha taught true permanence, true bliss, true self, and true purity. This is the most definitive level. For example, true permanence transcends the 2 extremes of both permanence and impermanence. As for bliss, it is beyond worldly joy and sadness, beyond the extremes of pleasure and pain. That is why sutras often speak of great bliss wisdom. This is not like saying, "Oh, I feel so comfortable." That's not great bliss. If you think, "I am so happy" is great bliss, that is certainly an ordinary conceptual thought. That kind of happiness vanishes in a moment and becomes suffering. That is just the suffering of change or all-pervasive suffering. It's not great bliss. Then there is true self, which is the actual Buddha nature, the Tathagatagarbha, the nature of the Dharmadhatu. And true purity is the original face of the pure Dharmadhatu. In fact, the meanings taught in tantric teachings can be perfectly integrated with what we are discussing here. Now you follow the words, but go against the meaning, using nihilistic impermanence and a dead permanence to misinterpret the Buddha's most profound and subtle final words. Even if you read it 1,000 times, what benefit is there? He said to Xingchang, since Xingchang had asked for a detailed explanation, the master has now explained the principles of permanence and impermanence very meticulously. We must take this passage to heart. Whether you study the Sutra tradition or the Tantric tradition, you must remember this. In doing so, many of the most crucial meanings in Buddhism will become clear to us. Otherwise, many people today might believe that they have already understood the true essence of Buddhist teachings, whether it is emptiness or luminosity. In reality, they have not truly understood. He said, now you rely on words such as permanence and emptiness from the sutras, but you have actually gone against the meaning of the definitive teachings. Furthermore, you mistake nihilism for impermanence. Regarding what is currently called non-existence or emptiness, you mistake mere nihilism for impermanence. And for that which is fixed, existing and enduring, you treat it as a kind of dead permanence. Something eternally unchanging, constant, and stagnant. In doing so, you will misinterpret the Buddha's most ultimate, perfect, and profound meanings found in the subtle sutras. Actually, it's not just the disciples of the 6th Patriarch. Many people today might simply lack a long-term reliance on a virtuous friend and have no opportunity for proper study and reflection. They might gain a superficial understanding of some sutras and commentaries. Ultimately, they consider themselves experts. Many professors and scholars often believe they have reached a professional level of Buddhist knowledge. In truth, the level of their understanding remains quite shallow. There are quite a number of people like this. If that's the case, even if you read the Nirvana Sutra or other scriptures 1,000 times, it would actually be of no benefit. It is vital that we understand the true meaning through the pith instructions of a teacher. Otherwise, you may study and read books by yourself every single day. Even some famous people nowadays travel everywhere to lecture and teach. They have good reputations, wealth, and merit, but in reality, what they are teaching might not touch upon the profound essence of Buddhism. If that is the case, it is indeed a great pity. Especially for those with ability, prestige, and intelligence, it is essential to understand the most profound meanings in the sutras. Otherwise, you lecture on Buddhism constantly, yet you haven't even come close to the truth yourself. That is likely very dangerous. Xingchang suddenly attained great enlightenment and spoke a verse. In the end, he also composed a verse on enlightenment. After the master gave him these direct instructions, it suddenly all became clear to him. In those days, the capacity of some practitioners was exceptionally high. Principles such as these might have been taught by many later lineage masters to their disciples as well. But perhaps due to a lack of karmic connection, it was not so evident, because we are now in an era that places heavy emphasis on material things. Nowadays, even if someone attains enlightenment, they might not write a biography, nor would others ask for one. So before they pass away, others may not know of their high realization. At the very end here, he left behind this verse. Because of clinging to an impermanent mind, the Buddha spoke of a permanent nature. One who knows not skillful means is like one picking up pebbles in a spring pond. Now without applying effort, Buddha nature appears before me. If not granted by the master, it would be beyond my reach. He says here that because he did not know before, he had been clinging to a mind of impermanence or a mind of permanence. He had not realized the permanent nature the Buddha spoke of, the true great permanence, one who knows not skillful means. Through the master's detailed explanation this time, he has understood it completely. If one does not know such skillful means, the distinction between permanence and impermanence, then one is like the person picking up pebbles in a spring pond. The story goes that there was once a person who dropped his jewels and sapphires into a pond in the springtime. When he tried to retrieve them, he picked up some rubble, grass, and stones instead. He mistook fake treasures for real ones, which they certainly were not. It's exactly like that, just like picking up pebbles in a spring pond. Many people fail to understand the truth of permanence and impermanence. If one does not understand the Buddha's ultimate secret intent, one is like a foolish person who takes a fake treasure to be real, constantly talking about it, teaching it to others and believing it to be true. Many people are like this now, believing they have understood luminosity. What is luminosity? They think something that is clear and vivid is luminosity. Or they think they understand emptiness, yet they often cling to mere emptiness. Taking fake treasures for real, they spend their lives this way and even guide others. It's quite absurd and improper. It's a great pity to not know this skillful means. And today, without applying any effort or struggle, simply through this dialogue with the Master, through those causes, he was ordained elsewhere and read the Nirvana Sutra a few times. Then he understood the core Buddhist meaning of permanence and impermanence. Though this original face is eternally common to us, innate and always present, perhaps he truly attained enlightenment, or perhaps he understood it truly on a theoretical level. I cannot say for certain. Zhiche's ultimate realization is not explicitly shown here, but in fact he must have been extraordinary to be included in the Platform Sutra. He says that such a state, if not granted by the Master, would be beyond his reach. Indeed, the Chan tradition also relies on the lineage master to directly point out the nature of mind. It is highly emphasized. Thus, Buddha nature has appeared. Without the Master's guidance and his instructions, it is as His Holiness once said in a spiritual song at Mount Wutai, Manjushri is actually with us at all times, but without the right conditions, we would remain unaware. Some pith instructions from Saraha also speak of this. You possess the wish-fulfilling jewel, but without a teacher's guidance, you would never discover it yourself. The jewel has always been in your home, right in your pocket, but you simply never noticed. So we remain poor, searching elsewhere. It is said here that without this transmission from the Master, I, Zhiche, could truly never have gained anything. It's the same for many people. Relying only on academic research or arduous practice, truly recognizing one's nature would certainly be extremely difficult. The Master said, "Now you have understood thoroughly, so you shall be named Zhiche." Che bowed in gratitude and withdrew. The Master was also very pleased. "Today you have understood completely. You were originally called Xingchang when you came to subdue me. Through my guidance today, you have attained total enlightenment. From now on, you shall be named Zhiche." Thus, we can sometimes see from the biographies of great masters that some were actually quite bad at first, with very unwholesome intentions. He even intended to kill such a great being, but later, through the Master's guidance, he repented from the bottom of his heart. In the end, he became a great master himself. In this regard, we often say in Buddhism that if lay people, for instance, before they studied the Dharma, may have committed some negative karma but later repent sincerely, and sincerely come to recognize the Dharma and the original face of the mind, then those previous defilements should not pose a major obstacle for them. This is a very classic example. Zhiche eventually departed. He bowed in gratitude and withdrew. This is one koan. Next, we shall discuss the second koan concerning Shenhui. Shenhui was also in fact, every koan in the Platform Sutra has its own unique characteristics. The mindsets of these great masters and their experiences in relying on their teachers, as I mentioned earlier, may serve as a helpful reference for many of our Dharma friends. There was a young boy named Shenhui of the Gao family from Xiangyang. At the age of 13, he came from Yukon to pay his respects. There was a young boy named Shenhui. Shenhui was actually from Xiangyang in Hubei province. When he was 13, he traveled from Yukon in Hubei to Guangdong. The distance was exceptionally long. Since there were no trains, planes, or cars back then, he came on foot. In some historical accounts, it is said that because he walked several thousand miles, his feet were eventually worn and blistered. He was quite a pitiable sight when he arrived, a 13-year-old child. Likely with no one to accompany him, he reached there all alone. When one's Buddha nature matures, there is an opportunity to rely on a teacher from youth. His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche also mentioned this in his Song of Realization. Regarding the auspicious conditions of his youth, the initial favorable conditions had already manifested in the Dharma. In our lives, some auspicious conditions might not manifest in the context of the Dharma. For instance, for some Dharma friends here, the initial conditions of their lives began with doing business and manifested through their trade. For others, the initial conditions manifested through unwholesome deeds. For example, when you graduate from university and enter society, those are the first conditions. For many of us, it is likely quite difficult for the initial conditions of our lives to manifest in the Dharma from childhood. In the Tibetan region, some great masters had excellent conditions in the Dharma from youth. The same is true in the Han region. Look at Shenhui. He was very young, only 13 when he arrived here. The master said, "Virtuous friend, you have traveled far with great hardship. Have you brought the fundamental with you? If you have the fundamental, you should know its master. Try to tell me." After the young monk arrived, the sixth patriarch said to him, "Virtuous friend, you have come from a very distant place, traveling thousands of miles. You look very tired and weary. You have done quite well." After his arrival, the sixth patriarch asked him, "Have you attained your original face, or have you not yet? How did you attain this original face? If there is an original face, who do you consider to be the master?" He initially asked this of the young monk. Do you really recognize or have you seen the original face? Even if you have seen it, who is doing the seeing? He posed this question to him. Then he told him to try and answer. Let's see how he responds. Shenhui was also quite clever. Shenhui said, "Non-abiding is the fundamental, and seeing is the master." He said the original face is primarily non-abiding because the mind should arise without abiding. It is centered on non-abiding, and seeing is the primary master. He believed the original face is non-abiding. The nature of the mind has no place to dwell. And who recognizes this non-abiding? It should be recognized through direct seeing or awakening. That is likely what he meant. For a 13-year-old, he answered the question quite remarkably. However, in order to guide him, the master did not praise him outwardly. He didn't say, "Your insight is so high for such a young age. What a wonderful answer. Who is your teacher? You are quite extraordinary. I will prepare a small Dharma throne for you to sit on." There was no such praise. In order to eliminate his pride, as some biographies of masters describe, the master would criticize him or show disapproval in different settings. On one hand, this was to remove his vanity and arrogance. On the other hand, it was to clear away many adversities and obstacles in his life and to create a smooth, auspicious connection for his future activities for sentient beings. There were such factors involved. The master said, "Why does this Shramanera use such cliches?" The master said, "Oh Shramanera, how can you just repeat the words of others? This is not something you have realized yourself. It is certainly not your own view. You are merely repeating someone else's words." So, outwardly, he did not approve. In truth, looking at the actual situation at that time, some past masters said there are different names for a Shramanera. A Shramanera from ages 7 to 13 is called a crow-chasing Shramanera, so he had not yet reached the standard age. From ages 14 to 19, they are standard Shramaneras, the ideal age for being one. From ages 20 to 70, they are called Shramaneras in name only. By that time, one shouldn't be a Shramanera. but a bhikshu. Thus, they are Shramaneras in name only. There are such classifications in the Han Buddhist tradition, but here he could be called a crow-chasing Shramanera because he was 13. The Vinaya also states that before age 15, if one can chase away crows, they may join the monastic order. At that time, 2 young boys from Ananda's family also wanted to go forth. The Buddha asked if they had reached age 15, and they had not. Then the Buddha asked if they could chase away crows, and the answer was yes. So they were permitted to join the order. There is such a precedent. Now some people in the Han region especially like to dress children in monastic robes. Those 2 children could barely walk that day, yet they were here. Their parents or someone brought them, feeling very joyful about it. But I think ordaining too early might be a bit. Since the child understands nothing, you just put the robes on him. The child himself is quite... For him, things like the mind of renunciation are completely out of the question, yet the parents insist that he must wear the monastic robes. Oh, you look so good in these robes, so cute, such a good boy. How wonderful. Come here, let me take a photo of you. Snap, snap. Regarding this Shramanera, this 13-year-old, the master said, "You are very glib." But Shenhui asked the 6th Patriarch a question in return. Shenhui asked, "When you sit in meditation, Master, do you see or not?" Because Shenhui had just said that non-abiding is the fundamental and seeing is the master, it seemed that the master in his outward manifestation did not approve of seeing as the master. The young monk immediately questioned the 6th Patriarch back. "Well, great master, when you sit in meditation, do you see or not? Since you didn't seem to approve when I said seeing is the master, calling it a cliché, in that case, master, what about yourself?" He asked whether there is seeing or not during the master's meditation. The master struck him 3 times with his staff and said, "When I strike you, does it hurt?" The master did not answer directly, because the Shramanera asked whether he sees or not during meditation. The 6th Patriarch did not give a direct reply. He used his staff to strike the boy firmly 3 times, perhaps on the head. Then he asked, "As I strike you like this, does it hurt or not?" Shenhui replied, "It both hurts and does not hurt." Shenhui answered, "When you strike me like that, it both hurts and does not hurt." The master said, "I both see and do not see." Regarding the previous question, he now said, "I both see and do not see." Since Shenhui mentioned hurting and not hurting, the master replied with seeing and not seeing. Shenhui asked, "What do you mean by both see and do not see?" He began to ask, "Master, you said both see and do not see. What does that mean?" The master became a little displeased. The master said, "What I see is the constant witnessing of my own mind's faults. I do not see the right and wrong, or the good and bad of others. Therefore, I both see and do not see. As for your saying it both hurts and does not hurt, what of it? If you do not feel pain, you are like wood or stone. If you do feel pain, you are like an ordinary person, and anger will arise." The master began to debate him, and it was a very fine debate, because Shenhui had just asked him the meaning of seeing and not seeing. The master explained, "When I speak of seeing, it actually refers to frequently during meditation observing one's own faults, seeing and discovering oneself. Unlike you, I look for whatever flaws exist within myself. We have a saying in Tibetan, one cannot see a yak running on one's own face, yet one can spot a tiny louse on another's face. This means one often notices even the smallest shortcoming in others, but fails to see glaring faults in oneself. I am not like that. In my practice, I constantly observe my own failings. Thus, I am able to see my own faults. Whether during formal practice or in post-meditation, I do not see the rights and wrongs or the good and bad of others. I do not constantly pick at others' flaws or gossip. These things I do not see. Therefore, it is logical for me to say seeing and not seeing. Regarding my practice, I can say I see and I do not see. Seeing my own faults while not seeing others' gossip is consistent, but for you to say it hurts and does not hurt is illogical. Why is it so? If you say it does not hurt, as it relates to your mental continuum, you become like an inanimate object, like wood or stone. That makes no sense. it is quite illogical. If you say it does hurt, then in your practice you are just like an ordinary person. Since I have struck you firmly 3 times today, if you feel pain, you will surely give rise to anger. Thus, you have nothing. Although you outwardly use the language of the Chan masters, investigating the Huatu and asking seeing or not, hurting or not, it is illogical if you do not actually possess such a realization. Therefore, you would give rise to a heart of hatred. Your previous seeing or not is duality. Hurting or not is arising and ceasing. You do not even see your own nature. How dare you mock others? He said, speaking of seeing and not seeing is actually falling into the 2 extremes. Seeing is an extreme, and not seeing is an extreme. The Buddha also stated in the sutras that seeing and not seeing are dualistic and illogical. Regarding hurting and not hurting, they are also extremes, arising and ceasing. If you have not illuminated your own nature or truly realized the Dharmata, how can you fool others? How dare you use such a tone of hurting or not? In fact, this is a teaching for future generations. Many people are like this today. They have no realization of their own, yet they constantly say everything is emptiness or it is not emptiness. Or they use terms like everything is luminosity and so forth. Although these beautiful terms exist in the records of Chan masters and the lineage patriarchs, if we ourselves do not possess such a state of mind, it is entirely just acting clever. It is an illogical way of speaking. If you truly see nothing of the original face or the nature of all phenomena, how could there be hurting or not hurting? From this reasoning we see that Shenhui had not yet awakened to his nature. Since he had not awakened, it must have hurt when he was struck. There was no need to say, it hurts and does not hurt. It was merely taking others' words and using them for oneself. In reality, it was improper. Shenhui bowed in repentant apology. Finally, Shenhui also came to realize it. Once the master spoke, he felt it was right to repent and apologize. He recognized his previous claim of hurting and not hurting was incorrect. The master added, if your mind is deluded and you do not see, ask a teacher to find the path. If your mind is awakened, you shall see the nature yourself and practice according to the Dharma. The 6th Patriarch continued to guide him, saying, if your own mind is deluded and you have not seen the nature, then there is no need to ask about seeing or not seeing. Instead, you should ask a teacher how to practice. As one who has lost their way, you should ask how to find the path to liberation. You must seek your own way to freedom. If you are not yet awakened, this is what you should do. If your mind is already awakened and you have seen the nature of the mind, then even after seeing it, you should still practice according to the Dharma. There is no need to ask me whether I see or not. The 6th Patriarch was still a bit displeased. Sometimes, when a disciple's phrasing is improper with a master, it can make the relationship quite strained. However, in this case, through this questioning, the master was moved to give profound teachings. You see, he says here, if your mind is not awakened, ask about things relevant to your awakening. Why concern yourself with whether your teacher has seen the nature or not? Why meddle? Whether I see or not, what does it matter to you? It's unnecessary. Since you are relying on a teacher, you shouldn't be asking or scrutinizing this now. If you are truly awakened, then you still need to practice according to the Dharma. Why go around asking others, have you seen it yet? For us practitioners, this is actually very important. First, if we are not yet awakened and are still seeking, when we meet a spiritual teacher, we should resolve matters concerning our own liberation. That's one point. Second, if we have truly gained some insight, at that point we must practice according to the Dharma. As we say in the Tantric teachings, after recognizing the nature, one still needs the guide's instructions to familiarize. One must strive continuously to elevate one's realization. Chan is the same. Once you have seen the nature, you cannot think, oh, I have seen the nature, I am liberated. From now on, I don't need to study or practice anymore. You can't do that. You must continue to rely on a teacher for a long time and practice correctly. You are deluded and do not see your own mind, yet you come to ask if I see or not. My seeing is my own knowing. How can it benefit your delusion? If you see it yourself, it doesn't depend on my delusion. Why not know and see it for yourself instead of asking whether I see or not? The sixth patriarch was still thinking. Your previous question was wrong, he said. If you haven't seen the nature yourself and are still deluded, then why ask me? What does my seeing have to do with you? My seeing is my own. What impact does it have on your confusion? My awakening. Why ask? It's none of your business. My awakening belongs to me. So, if you are not yet awakened yourself, you shouldn't ask me if I've seen it. It doesn't concern you. Why ask this? Don't ask it again in the future. On the other hand, if you have already seen the nature, then whether I see or not is also irrelevant to you. The sixth patriarch was quite a formidable debater. Even though his methods were different from the formal logic of pramana, his words were very sharp. It's not the same as our three-characteristic inference, but still, he said, if you have seen it yourself, it's not based on my delusion. Even if I haven't seen it, you already have. Since you've seen it, even if I haven't, it doesn't hinder you at all. Why not know and see it for yourself? You know for yourself that you have seen the nature. That should be enough. Why ask me if I've seen it? It's like some of the reasoning in the way of the Bodhisattva. If you haven't seen the nature, there's no need to ask me. It doesn't concern me. If you have seen it, you should ask even less. My confusion wouldn't affect you. Generally speaking, in the process of relying on a teacher, one should first observe whether the teacher is awakened. This is necessary, but once you have truly committed to them, then you scrutinize. Many in the Han region do this. First they take empowerments and study for a long time, and only later they start wondering, is he really an awakened one? Is he a good spiritual teacher? Are his vows pure? What kind of person is he exactly? Only then do they wake up and decide to examine the master. It's like bringing the master to court and interrogating them step by step. There is no need for that. That's what the sixth patriarch was saying. Then Shenhui was moved to prostrate a second time. Shenhui prostrated more than 100 times, seeking to atone for his fault. He served with diligence and never left the master's side. Then Shenhui, who might have only bowed 3 times before, now did 100 full prostrations. My fault! My fault! I shouldn't have asked that. I should have asked myself whether I see or not. I shouldn't have asked whether you see or not, Master. He prostrated many times, seeking the master's forgiveness and repenting his error. From then on, he diligently served the sixth patriarch and never left his side. Never leaving his side actually means he stayed to hear the teachings. It doesn't mean every student becomes a personal attendant. After all, there were already several before. If that were the case, a master would have far too many attendants. Attendants often have strained relationships among themselves. Attendants of many masters often have internal conflicts. Initially, many people love being an attendant to a master, but gradually, jealousy and gossip arise between attendants. Some even stop speaking of the master's qualities after they leave. Oh, this master isn't fair. When I first started, he treated me so well, but now it's like he ignores me. He's so nice to so-and-so, I'm dying of envy. That's not very good, is it? I don't know how many attendants the sixth patriarch had. When it says attendant here, I think it means someone who frequently helped with his Dharma activities, or who stayed at his monastery to listen to the teachings. That is what never leaving his side means. It doesn't mean wherever he went, someone was on his left, his right, his front, and his back. That might not be the case. Regardless, you'll see. This was Shenhui's second repentance. One day, the master addressed the assembly. I have a certain thing. It has no head and no tail. It has no name and no label. It has no back and no front. Do any of you recognize it? By this time, Shenhui had been the sixth patriarch's disciple for a long while. Historically speaking, he had relied on the master for many years. One day, the sixth patriarch spoke to the entire assembly, perhaps during a lecture. He said, I have a thing that has neither head nor tail. It has no name, no written form, no back, and no front. Among all of you, is there anyone who recognizes such a thing? At that moment, Shenhui spoke up. Those who are quite capable often stand out in front of a crowd. For instance, people with unique traits who are destined for great things. Their behavior might even seem a bit eccentric or unconventional, while others remain quiet and unknown. Right after the question was asked, Shenhui stepped forward. Shenhui came forward and said, "It is the origin of all Buddhas, and Shenhui's Buddha nature." The sixth patriarch had asked what this thing without head or tail was. Shenhui replied, "It is the source of all Buddhas, and it is my own Buddha nature. Since the master described it, it must be my Buddha nature." The master said, "I told you it has no name and no label, yet you call it origin and Buddha nature. In the future, even if you have a thatched hut to cover your head, you will only be a follower of intellectual understanding." The master was saying that he had already made it clear, "I have a thing with no head, no tail, no name, and no label." He stated explicitly, "No name and no label." Indeed, no name and no label is a very fitting way to describe the ultimate reality. Ultimate truth has no sound, nor does it have written words. Transcending all language, it is called the ultimate truth. True meaning has no sound, no letters, and no language. It transcends language. That is the true ultimate meaning. So, when the sixth patriarch said, "No name, no label, no back, no front," he was referring to the genuine source, the true origin. He said, "I told you it has no name, yet you give it the names origin and Buddha nature. You even insist on calling it Shenhui's Buddha nature. In that case, it seems you won't amount to much. In the future, you will just live in a thatched hut." The word for thatched hut here implies a simple shelter, meaning you might just be a practitioner hidden in a mountain valley. You will only be a follower of intellectual understanding. Followers of intellectual understanding usually just study books in theory. In those aspects, you are just reading and analyzing for yourself. Beyond that, you are far from what could be called true awakening. From these words, it's clear the master did not openly recognize Shenhui's realization then. This is something many of our fellow practitioners should notice. For example, while a master is still alive, the disciple who will eventually contribute most to Buddhism might not be the one the master seems to favor most. The master might even criticize them publicly for a specific purpose. It says quite clearly here, "You'll just be a bookworm in a hut, stuck in the realm of theory. As for awakening and spreading the Dharma, you are out of the question." But in fact, after the master passed away, in the lineage of the Southern School, it was Shenhui who contributed the most and had the greatest impact. I believe this was due to the master's blessings and his hidden intentions. Because after that exchange, Shenhui continued to practice with great diligence. He practiced diligently for a very long time. This karmic link eventually bore fruit in his future activities. Some masters, while they are alive, may frequently praise a certain disciple's qualities in public, but for others, the master might not only refrain from praise, but even seem to disapprove of their views or behavior in front of everyone. Yet, through this connection, they still make a significant contribution to the teachings later on. Then it says here, after the patriarch passed away, Shenhui entered the capital, Luoyang. He widely propagated the sudden teaching of Zhiche and wrote the record of the manifestation of the school. It flourished throughout the world. He was known as Master Hizi. About 20 years after the sixth patriarch passed away, Master Shenhui's reputation began to rise steadily. Later, during the reign of Emperor Suzong, he entered the capital, Luoyang. There he widely propagated the sudden teaching of Zhiche. He specifically promoted the southern lineage of the sixth patriarch. Originally, Master Shengxiu's school had flourished extensively after the sixth patriarch passed away. Later, Shengxiu had a disciple named Puji. He regarded Shengxiu as the sixth patriarch, and himself as the seventh. The northern school was propagating extremely well at that time, but then Shenhui directly addressed the matter of the robe and bowl. He spoke about it in many ways during the Great Dharma Assembly. Looking at history at that point in time, the sixth patriarch's Chan teachings were on the verge of fading away. That was when Shenhui stepped forward. He verified how the fifth patriarch had transmitted the robe and bowl to the sixth patriarch, making it clear to the public. Furthermore, he was very successful in demonstrating his own realization. At the time, his life was even in danger, yet Shenhui disregarded his own safety to promote the master's spirit. Eventually, the school flourished once again, and Emperor Suzong recognized it. According to biographies of eminent monks, Shenhui lived to be 93. Other records, like the transmission of the lamp and sub-commentary to the great commentary on the Sutra of Perfect Enlightenment, say that he lived to be 75. Regardless, in his later years, he successfully spread the master's teachings. Thus, his contribution to Chan history is immense. Sometimes we can see that he began relying on a teacher at age 13. While the master was still alive, his activities and realization were not openly acknowledged, but later, with such inner strength, he widely propagated the sudden teaching. He also wrote The Record of the Manifestation of the School. The Record of the Manifestation of the School is only one fascicle long. It's quite brief, only about 660 words, yet this book is extremely famous. Due to the circumstances at the time, even the emperor held him in high regard. Consequently, Hezi Temple was established, widely propagating the Chan methods. Later, it seems the northern school gradually faded away in this region. It shifted its presence to Japan. Therefore, Shenhui played a crucial role in the continuity of the Chan lineage in China at that time. Whether he was truly awakened or not is a subject of various historical accounts. Regardless, the karmic conditions and the power of his vow to propagate the Dharma indirectly serve as evidence of his realization. Otherwise, an ordinary person would likely lack such capacity and spiritual authority. This is something we of later generations can clearly see. With this, the story of Shenhui is concluded. The master saw that people from various schools came to challenge him with malicious intent. Many gathered at his seat. Out of compassion, he said to them, "Practitioners of the way should completely eliminate all thoughts of good and evil." During the time the sixth patriarch was alive, because he was an awakened master who was reportedly illiterate, many people harbored doubts about him. Many figures from the Tiantai school and other traditions, including masters from the Yogacara school and various other sects, frequently came to question him, but their questions often stemmed from jealousy or malice. Since he was quite famous and had many followers, it's like the saying, "A tall tree catches the wind." When someone achieves such status, many find it hard to tolerate. People with all sorts of motives gathered at his seat. At that time, the sixth patriarch often told them, out of compassion, "Practitioners of the way should completely eliminate all thoughts of good and evil." The master emphasized this core Chan principle regarding good and evil. It is best not to engage in sectarian debates. While the distinction between good and evil is necessary temporarily, ultimately it is not. Thus, from the ultimate perspective, even the Buddha discourages attachment to these thoughts. Thus, one sees that suffering results from black karma, while happiness arises only from virtuous karma. Liberation is gained through wisdom beyond good and evil, yet even thinking about karma and its fruits is discouraged. First, the results of evil suffering stem entirely from black, unvirtuous karma. The results of happiness stem entirely from virtuous karma. This is the conventional view. Pain and pleasure are produced by the causes and conditions of virtue and non-virtue. In the ultimate sense, liberation is attained through wisdom that transcends good and evil. True liberation occurs only when there is neither good nor evil. However, ordinary people cannot easily grasp this. Therefore, in definitive sutras, the Buddha advises ordinary beings against over-analyzing cause and effect. Ordinary people shouldn't try to overthink the mechanics of karma directly, as it easily leads to wrong views. You won't truly understand the complex relationship of cause and effect. So, thinking about karma and its fruits is discouraged. This is very important. Even if you can't memorize the whole verse, remember, thinking about karma and its fruits is discouraged. The Buddha discouraged it for ordinary people, because the intricate workings of karma are beyond the grasp of ordinary thought. Only the enlightened can truly know how good is rewarded with good and evil with evil. Thus, ordinary beings should simply rely on the scriptural authority. Don't try to figure it out solely by yourself. If you do, you'll end up confused and prone to wrong views. Where there is no name to be named, it is named self-nature. As I just said, in the ultimate sense, both good and evil should be discarded. Ultimately, there is no name. That no name can be called a name, and that name is attributed to the self-nature. This non-dual nature is called the true nature. Upon this true nature, all teaching schools are established. Upon the true realization of self-nature, we establish all the different schools. Whether it's Chan or Huayan, any school is just a matter of different perspectives of realization. Without that true realization, no school could be meaningfully discussed. All schools are established based on different emphases in recognizing the self-nature. Hence the establishment of Tibetan Buddhism, Han Buddhism, Theravada Buddhism, and various sects. For example, within Tibetan Buddhism we have Gelug, Nyingma, many new and old schools. Without realization, it's just talk. It lacks substance. All schools are posited upon the self-nature. In the ultimate sense of this self-nature, there is no contradiction. Upon these words, you must see it for yourselves. So now that I have finished speaking, it's best if you stop debating. And don't come to me every day with this question or that question. An old monk like me gets tired answering you all day long. It is best for you to realize the self-nature. Without that realization, daily questioning is futile. Some people today ask questions every single day, but after receiving a good answer, they don't even record or remember it. It seems they just want to ask. While the answer is being given, they are already distracted, thinking, "Oh, what's my next question?" If you haven't even absorbed the first answer, what's the use of the next question? Upon these words, you must see it for yourselves. I hope that after hearing this, you will recognize the self-nature and practice well. Without practice and observing the mind, no amount of questions will help. Even some reporters today ask 200 or 300 questions. But even with 300 or 400 questions, the most fundamental thing is to personally realize a portion of the truth. Upon hearing this, everyone bowed and requested to serve him as their teacher. After hearing the words of the sixth patriarch, everyone prostrated with great respect and accepted him as their true master. They committed to serving the master and dedicated themselves to whatever was needed. Those from various schools who originally came to challenge him changed after the master spoke. Education is truly vital, both in Buddhism and the secular world. After the sixth patriarch spoke, many minds fully understood the teachings. Listening and contemplating like this is surely the most meaningful way to spend one's life. Well, this chapter is now finished.
Bandara